morning, everyone. My name is Farah Ali, and as the KZN Provincial Chairperson, I would like to welcome you all to another session in our HR series. In an ever-changing world of work, the only way to succeed is to adapt and evolve. Changing how you think and act to match the future of work can be daunting. You would also know that interviews have drastically changed, and preparing for that interview can be both stressful and terrifying. So how do you stand out in a virtual interview? How different is it? And how do you create that connection that you would have done in person? And today we have with us Ayanda Hlubi, Senior HR Business Partner, Relationship Channel, Retail and Business Banking, Nedbank. And he's going to share some of his hints and tips to help us improve on our skills and make the most of the opportunity whilst in that interview. Ayanda, thank you so much for making the time, for coming and sharing your knowledge and your experience with us.
Good morning, Farah, and thank you for that welcome. And it's indeed a privilege for us to be part of this empowerment session. I call it an empowerment session because that's what BMF stands for. Watching that introductory clip of where BMF comes from is quite encouraging. Before we start, Farah, I need to do a few disclaimers. Firstly, that I know this has been billed as the do's and don'ts of the interviewing process, how to impress. I want to warn the audience that I offer no tricks on how to succeed in interviews, and the nature of the interview process, by its nature, it is very much a subjective process. But we've invited us here so that we can share insights and to help empower young people. And I'm told in this audience, we have young graduates, most likely young graduates, professionals, and to help and to empower them so that whatever mistakes that generally happen that can be avoided during the recruitment process can be avoided. With that said, I will then start sharing my my presentation. You let me know, Farah, when you can see it.
Yes, we can. I can.
Again. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. So, ladies and gentlemen, our agenda, I know we have 1.5 hours. So our agenda for today will cover, this subject is quite a very wide subject. We'll cover briefly of what it is that we mean when we're doing recruitment and selection, and the effect of social media profiles in our recruitment processes in organizations, and the effect of the hybrid environment on recruitment, and the common mistakes that through my experience and our experience we generally observe that can be avoided. But before we start, just to give an outline, why would any organization start a recruitment process? Any organization will start a recruitment process because there is, at face value, a vacancy to be filled. There is work to be done. And so they need a resource in the form of a human being to fulfill that function. So that's why we would have any form of recruitment. So of course, with the rate of unemployment in our country, particularly also with young people, there tends to be a mismatch between the available opportunities out there in the market and the people who can fulfill those functions. In some cases, you may have the skills out there, but the skill can't match the spaces where it needs to find this place. So there is basically a two-way process in the recruitment and selection, two-way process in the recruitment and selection process. Firstly, the recruitment is an open invitation in the market all over to say, here Well, I work for a green bank. Those who see money differently in that bank. So we'll firstly issue an open invite in the market to say, look, we have an opportunity. So typically, what is it that we as an organization or any organization would look for when they put an invitation out in the market? We're looking for a skill. We're looking for someone who can add value in our operations. And of course, we're a bank, we want return on investment. Can you help us to deliver value to our clients? We want a brand ambassador for our organization. And of course, whoever joins us or joins any organization must be able to fit the culture of that organization. That's what generally the employer, there could be many more reasons why organizations are looking for a person. But in a crux, that's what the employer would be looking for. But what tends to happen is we tend to look at recruitment as a one-way process where only the employer is looking to employ someone. And in the current environment, that is not so. I would say that is not so. You find candidates themselves, candidates today, just skilled candidates are not just willing to take up any position or anything around. So it is also an opportunity for the candidate to interview the employer, as it were. As much as the invitation comes from the employer, it is my opportunity to see if, do I really want to work for this organization? Because I believe I have value to offer, I have the skill to offer. So what most candidates would look for are career prospects. So if I join your organization, am I likely to grow in this organization? What are growth opportunities for me if I join this organization? What is the alignment between my personal values and what this organization stands for? So particularly on this one, the values part, it can be dictated by a whole lot of things. So it can be because of my religious beliefs that perhaps I may not, under any circumstances, be associated with a particular brand, a company that maybe is in the market for something that is against my own personal values or the values of where I basically come from. There's obviously a financial reward. So all of us, you need to be paid for the services that you offer. For a skilled candidate, it's not a begging session. So if I'm invited to an interview, it's not an opportunity for me to go and be a beggar. Skilled people are not necessarily beggars. So now I think this is important because for not just the candidates, but also for people who invite candidates with employment prospects. So as an organization, we need to change our perspective and must not just think that all candidates are begging for employment. As much as there is a high level of unemployment in our country, but skilled people are highly discerning. They choose what they want, they know what they stand for, and so we should not treat candidates as people who are there just to be treated anyhow. So what does it mean if I'm an organization and embark on a recruitment process? That I need to treat my candidates with respect because they are not here just responding to my invitation, but they're here also to assess, do I really want to work for this organization? Does this organization stand for what the values of this organization? Do they align with me as a person? The people, just to give an example, the people who may not under any circumstances be associated with a brand that basically, perhaps, I'm just making an example, I won't mention company names, but that is involved in alcohol. It is because if the person's personal values are not aligned to that, I will not be associated with that type of organization. So my message, my first message to candidates, before we get to the interview process, before you even put forward your CV for a possible employment prospect, the question is, what are you looking for in employment? Because I'm also suggesting don't fall for everything and anything. Now, there is nothing as dangerous as a candidate who can take anything because they just need to work. Now, it may not sound well when I put it that way, because, well, at one level, people want to work, but it is important. If I say I'm looking for a possible opportunity, I must know what I'm looking for. I can't just be falling for anything and for anything that comes by and I'm into it. So if I do that, I may join an organization, then a few months down the line, we realize, that is not what I was looking for. So that's the basic message before we actually even get to the point of being interviewed. At least know what you stand for. So then we shall move forward. So let's get to the actual employment application process. So here there is a possible opportunity, let's say with Nedbank, our proud bank. And what happens? So you see an advert that Nedbank puts out there. The question is, you don't work for Nedbank, but what is it that you want to do before you actually submit your application? At least do homework of what Nedbank does. At least know what banking is. What do we do in banking? And this is particularly important for people who are entry-level candidates. And again, I say particularly important, but it also applies to people who've been around. It's amazing when you engage a person and for a possible opportunity. So I was into at least do homework about the organization, do homework about the industry. So if an opportunity arises in an insurance industry, at least understand what insurance business is all about. Understand what is, who are the players in that market. Now, it is easy because when you think of financial services, I'm just using financial services as broadly, a person who can sell insurance does not mean that person is competent to sell banking, as an example. A person who is a car salesman does not mean also that he can do selling in technical industries. So understand what happens in the industry. Again, I'm connecting this to my first slide where I was just saying, at least understand what you are looking for, know what you are looking for. So don't fall for anything. Now, in the current environment, I say also verify who the advertiser is. Now, with a lot of online fraud that is out there, so when you see wherever in the social media an advert that has Ayanda Shubi's name, and don't just put your details out there, because once it's out, you're open to fraud. At least before doing that, understand you can check out who this advertiser is. You may go and verify, is there indeed an Ayanda Shubi out there? If so, that such information is also readily available in the social media. So the point I'm making is, it is the level of fraud. And at times, what happens is you get people who use real information to commit fraud because they know people out there are looking for opportunities. So again, I'm saying before putting up your CV out there in the market. Make sure, just verify this. This is just basic information. And of course, in South Africa, the exchange of money for recruitment purposes is not allowed. Now, let's get to the actual submission of the credentials. The actual submissions of the credentials to the prospective employer. Now, there are all sorts of formats of basic information, but this is what I want to highlight. ID information, a definite no-no. You don't want to put such information out there. And before you even know that these people, whoever that you are engaging, is actually interested in your services. Again, because it goes back to the factor of fraud. So the information that you put out there, it must be such that it does not compromise your identity. Because in the current environment, again, it is easy to commit a fraud. And the basic, again, information in the CVs is amazing again. A lot of times you get CVs that are not updated, CVs that are not, actually don't align to the position that you have advertised as a prospective employer. So it has to be relevant. I'm not saying you can change your CV, but the point is, why even apply for a role when you know that there are no prospects, when it is clearly visible that your skills that you have are actually not aligned to the type of role that has been advertised. In most cases, roles, they have basic requirements. So if a role requires a specific qualification, if you don't have it, you don't have it, because in some cases, that is particularly important. So I know for those who are believers, it is also people will say, let me exercise my faith and take out my credentials out there. Well, it works in some cases. In some cases, it's just purely it just doesn't work. But I must add, you understand why a lot of people will just respond just to about anything. But if you are a potential candidate, I think it's important to narrow down your search. Don't just put it, your CV cannot be all over the place. At least narrow down your search. It helps you to focus. It helps you to at least to zone in and understand what is it that I'm looking for. And of course, your reference check must be there too, so that they can be verifiable. Now, can you still hear me, Farah?
Yes.
All right. Now, this is a very, I'm not going to declare my age, this is a very interesting subject about the profile picture, because when I started working, in many cases, this thing of having your profile picture in your CV was not there. Well, at least for me, it's a relative recent development. I do see it happening almost all the time. And the question is, do I really need to put a profile picture in my CV? Where does it come from? Is it really necessary? Let me speak for myself. Those who work in the same field as I do, I'm yet to make a decision or be involved in decision-making about a recruitment of a person based on the profile picture. It begs the question, why do people have the profile pictures all over the place? I must also add, I have not been involved in recruitment for top models, for muscle men. I have not, probably a profile picture is relevant in such context, but in a just basic corporate environment, I don't know. People may argue differently, but I personally do not encourage it. For two reasons, I will say. One, in most cases, well, not in some cases, you note that the type of pictures that are out there, they're actually not professional. So you have you're applying for a CV, sorry, man, a potential opportunity in the corporate space, and your picture that is you're out there at the beach, or it doesn't talk to the type of environment that you are actually seeking employment for. So why do I need to even put a picture there? So I'm just saying, for me, you are just unnecessarily exposing yourself to potential discrimination, or based just purely on the profile picture, which wasn't even necessary. So of course, some people like it. I'll leave it at that. But just be careful what industry. Again, a profile picture, I'm saying, may be relevant for certain type of roles in certain industries. But I don't think, for instance, for us as a bank, we do check out how does Ayanda look like before we decide whether to shortlist or not shortlist. The purpose for recruitment is basically to assess if a person has the requisite skills or has the potential to be part of the organization. And that has nothing to do with how I look like. Whether my hair is long or blonde, it's just not necessary. But I'm open to any different views. I'm just putting it out there. So now you have submitted your CV and you have been invited for an interview. And now the question is, what then happens in your preparation for the interview? So generally, you have traditional forms of interviews, and in most cases it is referred to as the traditional interviews, or you have basically the behavioral interviewing process. Most organizations follow the competency-based behavioral interviewing format. So that is a much more structured interviewing process. It is structured in a way that the type of questions that are put across to candidates, the questions are put across based on the competencies for the role. So you assess the past behavior of the candidate, if a candidate's past behavior is likely to influence future performance. So how have you behaved in the past in similar work-related situations? And by posing such questions, we're able more or less to predict this is how you will respond to the similar situations as and when they arise within the organization. So it has less to do with opinions. What opinion do you hold about certain things? But it is about your experience. How have you dealt with similar or related situations in the past? And based on your response on those questions, I'm able to assess, oh, this person is likely to respond positively or negatively if presented with a similar situation in a different environment. As opposed to the traditional interviews, the traditional interviews, the questions tend to be broad questions, and is more about opinions. How would you deal with a particular situation? And it is unstructured. The question is very much open. So I can basically tell you anything about a situation even when I have no experience of such a situation, even when I have not been exposed to that type of situation. So hence, you find that in most organizations, they generally follow the behavioral interviewing format. So often it happens, this I must say, often it happens that we have not been exposed to that kind of situation. So you may apply for, you may be considered for a leadership role and yet you have not led people. So in which case you need to be declare and be open and say, I have not been exposed to such a situation, and offer your view on how obviously you will deal with such a situation. So this type of interviewing is much more, I would say, in the current environment for candidates, try more and more to, when you prepare yourself, align yourself to this form of recruitment and selection process. So the next part, for the past 2 years, if not 3 years, so I was just saying we hardly do face-to-face interviews in the current environment. More or less in South Africa, data reflects that about 70 to 80% of recruitment happens online. It's, if I say happens online, yes, as opposed to what used to happen in the past for professional roles. Most of the recruitment, in most organizations, at least the first steps of the selection process actually happen online. You will not have physically met with the recruiter or the person that you are engaging with. And so then the question is preparation for an online interview different to the traditional interview of physical interface? It is not. It is actually the same thing. Now we've just experienced a piece of network hazards. So I suppose that may be understandable, that is outside of your control, but where as much as possible, you need to prepare in a sense of, in the same manner that you would have prepared for a physical or face-to-face interview. So can you do an interview in a restaurant? I don't know about certain industries. So you need to find the right space. It's typically the right space, the location, and the network. All those basic things, they just need to be out there. And of course, aligned to the role that you are being interviewed for. So the fact that the interview is online does not mean that I must show up in my t-shirt, in my running t-shirt. It is, you need to project what the organization is looking for or who you are in the type of work environment. So all I'm saying, in a hybrid environment, it is quite easy to just be camera ready. That's the point I'm making. At a given point in the interview, may want to see your face. I may not have my video on for the entire process of the interview process, but at least be camera ready to say it may be possible that the interview may be, the interviewer may want to see me. So prepare, and prepare. That was my last slide, Sarah, Farah. I'm not sure if there are any questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ayanda. I want to open it up to the floor. Anybody have a question or a comment? We'll start with that. For Ayanda. Fungiwe, is there anybody? Okay, so Ayanda, I will Okay, so the first thing for me that stood out is that the ID. I mean, I would have thought that, okay, maybe we old school without giving away ages, but
Yeah.
but I mean, previously that would have been something you would have had to have put in your CV, and I think that's an important thing, because of the fraud. And I mean, we've heard some horrific cases of, you know, especially ladies being caught up in an interview process and not being seen again. So I suppose that's an important takeaway for me.
Yeah.
So when we talk about the skill, so for me, I'm thinking, so when you're interviewing, what advice would you give to a graduate who has no skill?
Yes.
Because I mean, that's one of the challenges as a country we face right now, is graduates, and they don't have the skill, and they, you know, yes, we may say don't apply for just anything and back and forth, but how do they get that skill? So they're in there. So how do they kind of, because you would have to almost start a negotiation process now, not for money, but in your value. Without this.
Farah, most recruiters, if the focus is on graduates, I would know that the person I'm looking for graduates, as an example. The company would know that the focus is on graduates. You know, the preparation that I was talking about, I'll also appreciate that the candidate doesn't have the necessary experience. But that preparation that I was talking about, of understanding, of knowing what it is that, and recruiters are not don't try and catch people really on anything. It's generally reputable companies, they don't try and catch people or try and find fault in people. It's mostly because you want to find the right fit. And so the onus is then on the candidate. As a candidate, you need to help the recruiter so to basically get an insight of who you are in terms of your skills, because now I'm saying your skills, not the experience. What skills do you have? So I will not ask a candidate, no interviewer will ask a candidate about a graduate from university about work experience, when you know these are basic graduates, but at least know something about the market where the position is. Like I was just saying, if you have to look for an opportunity in a car dealership, as an example, at least you have to be interested in cars. If you go to Toyota, at least you must know that the different kinds of engine capacities before you get there, because Toyota has different brands, they have different cars and engine capacity. I must be interested in cars before I get there. I need to at least know that there's a difference between Toyota and Ford or VW. It's not the same thing. That is basically at a basic graduate level. So it's not that the interviewer most likely will try and give you a checklist, as it were, but be interested. If I have an appointment with an insurance company, what is insurance? At least there must be a difference. I must understand there is long-term, there is short-term insurance. Or just the basics of the industry or of the organization where there is an opportunity. And really, I can say it again, employers will not try and trick candidates, but you find the unfortunate part is that candidates, they don't, even when it is understood that you have no work experience, but you make no effort, at least to understand that if you are
We lost you again, Ayanda. So while we're waiting for Ayanda to come back, I just want to open up the floor again. Bogiwe, is there anybody that you can see that has a question?
No, no one have questions or raise hands here.
Okay, so please put the question or the comments in the Q&A for us, please. Ayanda, we've lost you again.
I'm here. You can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Yeah.
Okay, so the other thing is I think we saw, which is important for me, is in the beginning of your presentation, I think I saw something about social media.
Yes.
Do you want to talk to us a little bit about that? Because you know, for me, it's and this is just, you know, maybe when you're a parent of older kids, you keep watching and reminding them of the things that they should and shouldn't be putting and sharing on social media, because 10 years from now, there could be such ramifications, you know, when trying to move up the corporate ladders, as we call it. So how impactful is that? And I mean, do recruiters, employers actually do that kind of homework on a candidate? I mean, as much as we are saying the candidate must do their homework, do the recruiters do that kind of in-depth homework on?
Well, let me, particularly the social media part, I suppose that would be industry relevant, but it may be at varying degrees. I wouldn't say all employers do research on candidates' social media. It is there, but we can't say it is as prevalent, but it's important. What I put out there in my whatever social media profile pages that I have, it's just important for people to understand that such information stays out there for a long time, because organizations have reputations to protect, and so if you are involved in practices that perhaps that may potentially harm the brand of the potential employer, in time the employers may not be interested. But even when you are already within the organization, so it's not just for when you are applying, but even when you are already employed, what you put out there is it's important. So if you have been posting things that are against your prospective employer, what becomes of you when such an employer becomes aware of it at any given point in time, because of what you there are quite interesting cases that are out there because of such practices. But more and more organizations are incorporating social media policies to the general employment policies. So to answer your question, it's important to appreciate what you post, what you put out there. Don't live to regret it. You can't be posting something about your own employer as an example, just so basic, whether you're a candidate or already employed.
Thanks, Ayanda. So I want to go and we have a question, and that was going to be actually my next question. So I want, can you take us into the actual interview? So when I say that, so one of the question that's come up is, and I was going to ask the question, should you bring up the salary, or should you wait for the prospective employer to bring up the salary?
Yes.
And leading on to that is, so do you go into the negotiation there and then? Do you go into that hard negotiation? Because in the beginning you said don't just accept anything, and you know, so taking all of that into context, let's start with who should bring that conversation of salary to the table first.
I'm afraid I will not put it as a general rule, but I think the law of scarcity is important there, Farah. So where you are recruiting for a scarce skill, it is important that that question is settled either by the prospective employer and the candidate there, and there is really nothing to be afraid of in expressing what your value is, because you also don't want to waste your time in engaging a candidate that is not interested or may not be interested in, or is looking for value X, when you know that you are not in a position to pay that. So, but as a starting point, I'm just saying, particularly if you are recruiting for scarce skill, you'll find that such questions are basically settled quite early, because as a prospective employer, you want that person, you want the candidate, and you want to understand in full what the candidate is actually looking for. But either the employer or the prospective candidate may ask the question, but you get given an opportunity to ask such questions as a candidate. And as a prospective employer, I also want to settle that question. Just give an indication from the outset, so that the candidate may know what to expect. So you don't want to engage and then be involved in other negotiations post the interview. In short, there is nothing to. It's one of those questions which I just think is too much is made out of it, unless the candidate, of course, is surely an unreasonable candidate. That's for the candidate to settle. Either way, for me, it's just a question that is not. It's not difficult. As a candidate, you must know what your value is. And of course, if you're an entry-level candidate, you may be so much of a price taker in such circumstances.
Thank you, Ayanda. I hope that answers that question. If you have a follow-up question to that, please put it in the chat, or we can ask it. So still in the interview, Ayanda. So the question is asked about, argument's sake, about the current employer, to the candidate, or if they've left their current employer, their previous employer. And what's your take on really the candidate running their current employer or previous employer down completely? Because we would all get tempted to say things sometimes in there because you want to show something or the other. But I know that we get drawn into that question has got so many connotations to it, and just take us through the things that don't work for us in how we answer a question like similar.
So in this case, you are referring to a situation where you start talking badly about your current employer.
Yep. That chuckle already says it's a no.
Let me say the basic level is bad manners. It is just not necessary. I suppose that question is generally settled because the prospective employer may want to understand why do you want to leave? Why do you want to leave your current employer? To the extent that it is necessary, I think sufficient information as to why you want to leave is important, but the detail of what may be happening, I don't think is necessary. it's just not necessary. So I wouldn't encourage a candidate. It's a definite no. Let me just be blunt and just to cut it short. So of course, the prospective employer may want to know, why do you want to leave your current employer, which is a valid question. And the reason for that, the prospective employer may want to understand whatever is making you leave. It may be a practice that is there with the potential new employer. So at least if you are dishonest about it. So as an example, it may be that I'm leaving my current employer because there's too much traveling involved.
Yeah.
Just make an example. There's too much traveling involved with my current employer, and my domestic situation demands that it makes it difficult for me. So it is sufficient that I indicate that, so that there are actually no surprises. I think that's basically that's important. But I'm just drawing a distinction between running down your employer, your current employer. It's at face value, it's just it's old-fashioned manners. It's not necessary.
Yeah, and I think it's also goes back to just answer the question you asked and don't add any more to it. You know, if it is a challenge, or the traveling, the example you gave, stop there. You know, don't talk about how they respond. You know, because for me, I would think, you know, sitting and interviewing a candidate, you would think, oh, you know, if we employ this candidate, they could walk around, you know, tainting the brand and reputation of this company the first time they hit a snag, you know.
I think what is essential is I may engage you about, for instance, what I stand for, as in my values. I may say what is important to me are these values, as an example, values of respect, but I can't then be saying my current manager is this or that. That's just not necessary. So, but I can share with you what my value system is, at least so that you understand who I am and what I stand for, as opposed to just simply running down your employer. But it is relevant for you to at least be honest with the prospective employer about why you are leaving your current employer, but not running your employer down.
Thanks, Ayanda. So there's another question that's come up. So is it appropriate to send an email? This is in two parts. Is it appropriate to send an email after the interview to thank them for the interview? Second, is it also appropriate to call and ask if the 3 weeks has passed that they had promised to call you back? So can you send the email to say thank you, and can you call them after 3 weeks?
Okay, I think what is appropriate is after the interview to understand how the process flow from there. So the general rule is you'll get a more or less insight as to the timelines for that role, or when you may receive feedback. So that should be sorted during the interview, which is clear. So some organization may do assessments, or there may be all kinds of checks that they may require. So that part may be settled during the interview. Of course, the bad practice, what may happen is if you don't hear anything from weeks, months pass by having not received any feedback. That, in my view, also is a reflection on the employer. Remember, I said it's also, you may want to, when you are invited for an interview, it's not just the employer who wants your skill, but based on that conduct, it can just give me an indication that I really don't want to work for such kind
Ayanda, we've lost you again.
People would have taken their time to.
Sorry, Ayanda, we lost you there for a second. So we kind of missed what you said for the last 30 seconds or so. We lost where you said you wouldn't want to work for such an employer.
Yes.
Mm.
Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, we can hear you now.
All right. So I'm not sure where I got cut off.
Where you said we may not want to work for such an employer who doesn't, give feedback or respond.
Certainly, who doesn't exercise the courtesy of actually giving me whatever the feedback is.
But I wonder, I don't know if anybody else has seen, but you would normally see an advert and they would say somewhere there in the fine print, if you haven't heard back from us within 3 weeks, consider the application unsuccessful. Is that not good enough from a prospective employer's, this now you've sent your CV and whatever the process is. Ayanda?
I'm here. I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Did you hear my question?
No, I didn't.
Okay. You see that in the early stages, so the advert will go out and then they'll ask for some kind of response, and then they will say somewhere in the fine print, if you haven't heard from us in 3 weeks or 2 months, considered unsuccessful.
When you have not been interviewed.
Yes, that is good enough at that stage. Well,
because generally you find that the volume of applicants tends to be high. So the practice where you have been interviewed, the interviewer owes you feedback. You owe the candidate feedback when you have interviewed the person. So in cases where you have simply applied, and in most organizations, you would find once the advert has closed, there would be automated response to give you, in a sense, brief feedback that the advert is closed or you were not considered for the role. Again, this is for most corporate organizations. That's how the system will generally work. So, but where you have been interviewed, of course, there needs to be that feedback from a person who would have engaged you. But as an applicant, where you have not been called, the technology is such that you are able to get feedback from the company, at least through their electronic tools, to say the advert is closed and you were not considered for the opportunity.
Thanks, Ayanda. Yeah. Thank you so much for that question. Please continue to put your questions or comments either in the chat or in the Q&A, or raise your hand and you can ask Ayanda the question. So let's talk a little bit, Ayanda, about the candidate. So what kind of questions should they not be asking? If there are any. So for me, the guidance I would always give, even with small businesses, before you go in and you do a presentation, I would say if it's to a corporate or to a large business, go onto their website, and all corporates and large business really put their annual report out on their websites. So it will tell you, if they've made the last 2 years, have there been losses? What have they managed to achieve in terms of their goals and not done so?
Correct.
Right. So how can they start that conversation without coming across as being disrespectful? Because, you know, we as human beings, we take things differently, and now we're doing all of this virtually. So we're not feeling the energy, we're not feeling the, you know, like we are now. You know, we're not seeing each other. You know, as human beings, we relate to the energy. You know, we feed off each other's energy, without it coming across as abrupt or rude or disrespectful, because all we're going by now is the tone of our voices.
It comes across, it goes back to the question where I was just saying, if you approach the process in a begging position as a beggar, because you are interested, if you have done your homework, such preparation would also include what do you sell, are you a stable organization, and so, and it goes to the financials of that organization, which in many ways, a publicly listed company, such information is readily available. So you'd know, you see that company X is made losses. Some things are once-off, some may be related, as in the recent cases because of COVID. So that's basic information. So as a candidate, you should be given an opportunity to ask any questions. So that's an opportunity there. And I suppose, not even suppose, when you go for the interview, it is if there are things that are worrying you, those are things that you want to clarify upfront. So it may be a question that you have jotted down somewhere that you want to put across. And so that you can understand, you may have a correct view or picture of the organization.
Great, thanks, Ayanda.
I think, as opposed to being rude, it reflects, it's an indication of someone who's interested, someone who wants to understand what we do, and outlook at it more positively than negative.
Thanks. Olwethu, did you want to speak? I think I saw you raise your hand. Did you want to say something? Please go ahead. Oh, okay, it was in here. Okay, so Olwethu's comment is, and thanks for your comments. Just a bit of advice: try and get feedback from the prospective employer. Even if you're unsuccessful, the feedback will help you improve 100%. 100% on that. And you know, my guidance to, in particular, to women is to, you know, to put up your hand when the time comes for the interviews. And I mean, I'm not saying go totally out of your industry and go all crazy. And as a rule for myself, I mean, years ago when I was employed, I mean, I have my own consulting business now, but when I was employed, as a rule, I would do 2 interviews, external interviews a year. And the reason I did that, it wasn't because I was unhappy. It was because I needed to find out how marketable I was still, and what was happening out there in the industry. So, you know, and that would help me going forward. So when you get back to you know, to your space and you're doing your PDPs, you know, you've got something substantial to have a conversation about in terms of, you know, identifying your own personal development. But I mean, that was just me at that time.
If you work for much bigger organizations, you may find that there are even more opportunities internally than having to go outside. And of course, if the organization that you work for has limited prospects, again, your practice was spot on.
Yes. Again, I just want to open it up to anybody. Please, if you're preparing for an interview or not, please while we have Ayanda with us to get all those questions to him. So Ayanda, I have a question. So in the interview, do you see a difference in how women respond and how women are, I want to use the word aggressive, but not in that nasty way, compared to men? So if you had to ask a man a question and ask the woman the same question, are men more robust in how they respond? And as women, are we downplaying our skills? Are we? And I mean, I just asked the question because for me, it's in everything that we do. It's about how we also grow and develop our women. So
Yeah.
in your experience, because you've been doing this for a while now, so or have you seen a change in that for the better?
Look, I wouldn't put it at that because I think some things are much more nuanced and deeper than that. So I can't say, I think it may not be proper to say I find, for instance, ladies much more docile than men. Well, you're talking about entry-level candidates, right? Or just more experienced people. So I think it is much more nuanced than that, as to say it is simply women versus a men scenario. They are highly confident. I suppose also it works for because of the type of environment where we work in. The selection process is much more tighter, so you know what it is that you are looking for. So as opposed to just recruiting broadly, generally, and be interviewing everyone, our shortlisting is much more tighter. It is much more focused. So I don't think that's, at least in where I operated, that is necessarily my experience. Not at all. But what I can say for entry-level candidates, I can say you do find cases where the environment plays a very much big factor for entry-level candidates. So a much more cosmopolitan candidate from a city environment like Durban may exhibit higher levels of confidence, someone who comes from where I come from. But that's basically either man or woman. So it can be either way. And also it's a function also that you probably, the universities or institutions of higher learning, they don't do much to prepare graduates for the world of work. And so they come, if people with no exposure, they come with basically serious limitations on how they interact, on how we interact with them. But as a recruiter, I must have an appreciation for that and understand who these people are, and at least try to lift them up, because institutions of higher learning are not doing much to upskill candidates or their graduates.
100%. Again, I want to go back to the floor. Is there any comments, questions, please? Okay. So, Ayanda, what kind of guidance would you have? Because, you know, we've come through COVID, and when we look at the province of KZN, we've come through riots and terrible floods. So a lot of people have had to change career paths.
Yes.
because, you know, the companies that they worked for just no longer exist, whether it was because of riots or because of the flooding, you know, and the whole COVID situation. Is there anything additional you could add, or anything that's different when you get into that interview now, because it's a big change? I mean,
one thing I can add, just one, there is a lot happening online, and so as opposed to before, where, you know, the word of mouth thing, there's just a lot happening online. So if you are really active in the job market, that's a space to actively look at, and some social media channels are much more credible than the others, but I just think there's a space to, whereas before people used to look at newspapers and adverts, that's basically gone. That world is basically gone and finished. So check a lot of what is happening online, but with a view of ensuring that you don't put your details all over, because, as I say, there is a whole lot of fraud that is out there. Because people know that people are looking for opportunities. Most organizations put their prospects online. That's where opportunities live, basically.
Okay, so you know, and the thing is, we spoke about the ID, Ayanda, but you know, there are so many apps now that face recognition apps. I mean, you don't even have to put your ID, even if you put your photo there on your CV, on your application. Yeah. With those apps now, these guys sit and do this fraud the whole day. It's how they earn a living. So they can even find you wherever you are with those apps. So I think, you know, even putting the you know, your pic out there is also dangerous now. I'm talking about in the job market, you know, when you're looking for things. And like you say, if you're modeling and all of that, yes, it's fine for that. But once you get into the professional space, you know, I think with everything that's out there right now, you know, ID, and your face is like your ID, your picture's like your ID for these guys. You know, they don't even need your ID number. They just have these apps, these face recognition apps, and then you know, they can find you, they can locate you. So I think we must also be, you know, just mindful of that, also with the CVs.
Yeah, Farah, that one of pictures, honestly, I just generally discourage it. As I said, except for where in industries where it is relevant. So if a prospective employer wants to see me, of course, then that there will be a direct request for that. And with a whole lot of things happening, I would be circumspect if I'm a lady as well, just to be throwing my picture all over the place. I know people do these things in good faith. They just maybe it's a done thing, but as I say, I'm yet to be involved in a situation where a decision to even invite a candidate was based on the picture.
Yeah.
You know, on that there is a Farah's picture, so she looks like we can invite her for. I'm just saying it's even more important for ladies. I just wouldn't encourage it, whether it is professional or not. But of course, if the employer says would like to see your face, that's a more direct request. I know that in some countries, it is completely discouraged, this thing of putting pictures online, because of the adverts, you know, views that may be attached to it, because people may think, oh, a decision was made of discrimination based on that, on the picture. But as a candidate, it's just your CV should. I don't think it makes a candidate much more prospective that I'm looking at your picture. Professionally, of course, but again, that's my view.
So as we come to closing, and this might not be totally relevant to the interview, but what should, because, you know, I think more and more we're moving into the space of profiles.
Yes.
You see, so if you can, what kind of information should we see in a profile, a personal or professional profile, versus what's in the CV?
Sure. Just as a general rule, of course, it needs to be aligned.
Mm-hmm.
But again, too much information that is, because your information there has to be room for confidentiality. That's the point I'm making.
Mm.
There has to be a level of confidentiality that you maintain as a person.
Mm.
And of course, you may have your profile that reflects what you do. But it is just, and I know that today the nature of our environment is such that we put out anything and everything that we do out there. Again, it's from industry to industry. If I'm in a business of selling cars, it would be important for my profile to reflect that I'm basically a good salesman for cars. Anyone who wants to looking for a sales executive for vehicle may in a way as an indication to, but I think that's basically sufficient information. We just have to discern what is sufficient information to put out there, as opposed to having your whole life on social media pages. There's also, of course, there are a whole lot of things that we do on social media, which is fine, but I'm just saying we just need to be discerning on what we want to put out there.
100%.
It is an individual choice, because what is on social media is a reflection of the person that I am. So it may be the kinds of activities that I do outside of, I can't separate myself from what I do outside of my work life. But I'm a proponent of at least retaining my confidentiality. It's important, not because they're secretive, but there has to be something that belongs to people who need to know about me.
Thanks so much, Ayanda. So I'm going to go back to the floor. Is there anybody who has any last comments to make, or any last questions for Ayanda? Okay, so I mean, for me, Ayanda, thank you so much. Thank you so much for this, and I know I'm going to go back and listen to this again. So for those of you who want to recap, it's you can go to our Facebook page, and you can go back and immediately you can go back and review it in your personal time, because I know I'm definitely going to go back, because I think it's this is the information that we need to be also sharing with our students, you know, not just the graduates, but with the students, because like we say, this kind of information is not shared with them at the universities, you know, in preparation. So Ayanda, I want to say thank you very much. It's been really insightful for me personally, and thank you so much for your time. And I'm hoping we do another session similar to this in our HR series. in our human resource series. Okay, we have a.
All right. Thank you so much, Farah, for your time.
So we have, thank you, Ayanda, much appreciated.
And thank you for
have a fun way. Thank you so much.
All right. And thanks to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Ayanda. So the comments are coming. Thank you all. We too added a lot of value. Thank you so much. And that's why we have to have these sessions where we share this information. And you know, it's just, I think in this new world of work, we're learning as we go along, because you know things are moving and changing so rapidly. So you know, we always need to come back. We always need to come back to these information sharing sessions for all of us.
Yes.
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 Thank you so much, Ayanda. Everybody who's attended, thank you. I'm really happy that you got some value out of the session. So thank you very much
Okay.
for taking time.
Thank you, Farah, and your audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ayanda. Take care. Thank you, everybody.